Welcome to Ritual Scale Modelling. This is part 3 of Revell's cruiser ship AIDA, scale 1 to 400. In part 2 I put the hull together and the first deck in. In this part I'm going to be putting in some more lights and putting in the cabin parts of the ship as well. So there's a little bit to do here, so let's jump into it and see how I get on. One of the first things I have to do is make up a couple of more lifeboats. These are the little canister lifeboats, and they're painted in 301 white silk. Any of the white parts that you see will be painted in this colour. I haven't really shown you me painting them, and just tried to cut down the length of the video, so that's why you haven't seen me with the paintbrush in hand. There are downlights that shine on to the lifeboats. So in order to do this, I'm having to make my own little holes here. So it's a simple case of just deciding where I want to put them. In actual fact, these marks that I'm making here with the pencil, I decided not to use these marks in the end. I put them slightly further over to where the harness or the bracket holds, which holds the lifeboats, just because it was easier to fit the lights in the end. So in order to do this, it's the simple process of using my pin drive to make the initial hole. If you can just make out on the camera, you'll see that I'm drilling where off center from where my original pencil marks are. And then of course I'm using my knife and twisting it around to open up the hole. Now these holes have to be wide enough to receive a 3mm LED. This is what I've got here. I picked these up on eBay, I think, just a case of various different sizes of yellow LEDs. I'm putting yellow ones in here, and I'm just checking the size as I go along. Before I put in the lights, I'm painting using 16 sandy yellow, and this is for the balconies on each cabin. So there's quite a lot to do, and this took quite a while. But it's just the floor section of each individual cabin. Now I've taken some Tamiya 6mm masking tape and I'm putting strips along the windows. Now, the reason for this is twofold. I need to black out some of the windows, and because I don't want them all to be lit up, or I want them to be lit up in lesser brightness, of different degrees of brightness, and this enables me to do that. I simply paint over the tape and with a black paint, and this creates the different depths of light. It also helps diffuse the harshness of the light LED as well, so it's not so bright it's just going to wash out everything. So it helps with that as well. And when the ship isn't actually in its light up form, it acts as a barrier so that you don't see the wires as much inside, and of course it gives it a little bit of depth as well. Looks like there's something in the room. Once I've got a few strips on, I'm using my brush sharpener to gently press down on the actual tape. Because it's masking tape, it's obviously bound to peel off at some points. There's a couple of ways you can get around this, of course. You can use a low adhesive glue for it to stick down, or you can use paper, paint it, then place it on. There's so many different ways you can do this, but this is my preferred way. I'm also just trimming off little bits of tape that are impeding onto the contact points of the model. This makes the tape lift up as well, of course. So it is advisable just to make little slits in it so that the tape conforms around any raised area. So we'll just flip it over so that you can see the effect it's going to have when it's in its non-lit state. So if you can see the top part, so you can see the mark coming through there, but on where the yellow tape is, you just see a different contrast in colour. So now so it's on to using Revell 08 matte black, and I'm just painting in now different areas along the strip of the cabins to dull the light effects even further. Now this won't completely black out the light. I would have to put on thicker coats for that. I just want to create more depth and shadow so that it is not all the one colour all the way through. So I'm preparing the lights here. I'm just placing them in. I'm holding them in there with a little bit of canopy glue just as a stopgap measure, so I know exactly what lights are going where and how I'm going to wire these up. And the reason for this is I want to make sure that the positive are all running in one direction, and therefore the negative will be running all in one direction as well. This will just help you from getting mixed up. So there's a little cabin wall that goes in here. This is the only side one that has it for some reason, but I'll just pop that in before I carry on with the lights. So with the lights, you can see that I've already started wiring some. I've put on the resistors, and again, as I'm going along, I'm checking for fit to see how they match up with the other ones I've already placed on. Once I've got the resistors and protective covers on, it's time to wire them up to each other. Now I'm doing this in a loop, so I'm wiring up the positive side first, and I'm just using a piece of thin red wire here, twisting it around each contact point, and I will solder these into position as I go along. And as I'm going along, I'm just checking for fit and length. I don't want too much wires bulging out, because you want it to make it as neat as possible, because if you do have to backtrack if something has gone wrong, then you want to make it as simple as possible to figure out what the problem is. So just make sure that if you are doing something like this, try and be as neat as possible. I mean, I'm a fairly untidy person when it comes to things like this anyway, but even I do try to make it as neat as possible while doing this. So now I'm happy with the length and the joints. It's time to solder these in position, and it's just a simple case of a little bit of solder on each joint. Don't worry about that one falling off. I put too much heat on it and it just popped solder off, but it was easy enough to fix. It was just a matter of joining it up together. It is a classic error when you're soldering it, but this is why I chose to show you this part, because it does happen, but it's not a big major drama or anything like that. All it is you've melted too much solder and your joints came loose. And it's easy enough just to rectify it and place it back on. And now I've got them all wired up. I've got the negative to negative and the positive to positive. Time for a light test. And as you can see, they're all glowing very nicely here. There's 8 on each side, so 16 in total. Now the lights are in, I can take away the supporting branches from the top of the cabin section of the hull. I left them on to the last minute because the top section of this part is very flimsy and it can easily break. So take these off at the last possible moment if you're doing this kit, because obviously you don't want to snap these because it'd be a nightmare to fix. It's time to fit the lifeboat, but first of all, each section has its own little crane to go on. These were very simple to place on. The first one and the last one do have different types, so I had to make sure I was putting the right ones in. The lifeboats themselves, they just pop in the middle. There's a little socket system as such, and they just get pushed in. You can actually afford not to put any cement in these. It's a really nice tight fit. So as you can see there, that's them all in situ. Onto the prow of the ship, and it's 50 light blue for this part. I'm not sure why it's blue actually, but that's what it's calling for, and it was difficult to get some photographs of this section of the ship. So I've decided just to follow the instructions on this, and I'm using the 301 silk to just touch up any of the white parts that I may have overrun with the blue. Next is to fit the bracket for the brow. I was tempted to try and fit this without putting the bracket in initially. I thought I would put it in at the end. It turns out you really have to do it this way. The instructions tell you to do it this way. But I thought I'd try to be clever and failed. So make sure if you got this kit to do it that way. You may have noticed I painted the underside black. That's so I don't get any light bleed. But once it was dried, it was a simple case of pushing it into the housing. Again, a very good fit, and the brow met the edges of the ship really well. This part of a ship build can be quite difficult to get each part married up in space. More often than not you get a gap, but with that one it was fine. So now that's all there, it's time to actually put on the cabins. Now there's a little trough that runs all the way around for this to sit in. It is a quite tight fit, not as tight that you can't get it in, but it was a little bit tricky just to line it all up and place it in. But the good thing about it was, once I was able to get it into position, I didn't really have to clamp it that much, just a little bit at the stern of the ship, where I had to make sure it was lined up and it wasn't going to move. So a little bit tricky to get it in, but once it was in, it worked out really well. So once both sides are on, there's a couple of brackets or supports that I had to place in. I'm just making sure that there's enough room for the wiring and things like that. And I'm also starting to think about the connection of the wire so that they've got power running all the way through them. So what's left to do is just joining up the wires to the power wires, just soldering up here. If you are doing this, be careful if you're doing it inside the model, because you don't want any bits of solder dropping off onto the plastic. It will burn it. So just be very careful while you're doing this. And then all that's left to do is a light test. So I'll just hook it up to the power and see how it goes. So I'll bring part 3 to an end here. Got quite a lot done with the second set of lights going in. In part 4 I'll carry on building up the decks and putting in some more lights, I would assume. So in the meantime, if you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the channel for my other builds. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll be notified of all my upcoming builds, including the next part for this one. Hit that like button and of course leave a comment. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.